Good morning and welcome back to the Compass. We're recording this episode on Wednesday, June 25th. Got a date stamp. See things with missiles flying everywhere. My name is Derek McPherson. I'm the chairman of Olive Resource Capital. With me, as always, is Sam Pelez, the president, CEO, and CIO of Olive. We are finding ourselves in an interesting situation in the mining space. It's something a little bit different than I think we've seen recently. Sam and I, with Olive, did something that we don't normally do. Is we saw a press release and we bought stock and didn't really figure it out first. It's working out right now, but we want to talk a little bit about that and talk about what happened and why we think it's actually meaningful for the mining space and meaningful for the company that we've looked at. And so that company is Elemental Altus Royalties Corp. That they had and I think if you don't know what the news is that they had two shareholders owned about 54% of the company. One of them was La Mancha, and one was a company they bought a stream from. And Tether, yes, the group that created USDT. Bought both those positions and now controls 54% of the company. We looked at that and they bought it at $1.55, and the market didn't really react to it initially. And so we bought some stock at $1.55. Didn't really, we kind of looked at it and said, "Oh, it looks really interesting. We should own some now." Now, stock's $1.80, so we're doing okay on that trade. But it's there's a thesis to it, but I think we need to delve into that thesis and why we kind of said, okay, kind of shot first and ask questions later. Subsequently, we've met with management. We're comfortable with that thesis. But I'm going to turn over to Sam maybe. And Sam, talk a little bit about we have mining guys on probably watch this podcast, don't follow don't know what Tether is or aren't that familiar with crypto. So I'm going to turn over to you to talk about Tether and the ridiculous amount of capital that they have.
The news came, I think, Monday last week, so it's already been a few days. The most interesting thing about this whole event was how it was obviously press released by the company, but most of the media coverage in our industry didn't seem to pick it up at all. Part of the reason we picked it up is because we follow the Discovery Group companies. If you remember, Elemental Altus is the putting together of two companies, one of which was originally a Discovery Group company, with which companies which we follow very closely and which whose leaders we are close with. And this press release comes up, and frankly, it was kind of out of nowhere and very unrelated to our business. So let me just walk you through what happened. They announced that effectively a crypto-related company is taking a controlling stake in the company by a private acquisition or sale and purchase of the shares of La Mancha and this other group. Together, call it rounded 50% of the company, slightly above market, nothing too crazy, right? Except that when you think about who's buying is Tether. And I've been involved with some early stage crypto infrastructure deals back in the last decade. And I have to admit that I didn't realize how big Tether is. I don't remember the exact number out of the top of my head, but they have over 100 billion in deposits, which they then use to buy US treasuries, which today yielding 4.5%, effectively gives them a cash flow north of $5 billion a year.
They don't. I think the important point is they don't pay interest on those deposits. They basically hold those deposits to. You give them a US dollar and you get a USDT, which is a stablecoin, which they can use to transact elsewhere in the crypto space. And so they collect that $4 to $5 billion every year just for themselves because it's a private company.
And let's just put it out there. This is US dollars as well.
Yeah, real money.
Just to put it in context, Franco Nevada has a revenue of 1 billion. So just think about context here. It's 5 times larger an entity. And I think it's north of 5 billion what they generate. So think about a company 5 times the size of Franco Nevada from a different industry with access to immense liquidity decides to buy a controlling stake in, with all respect to Elemental, it's not the largest, it's not among the largest royalty companies. It's in the mid tier of the royalty company. So that really piqued our interest. Obviously, this is a move that they're not doing out of spite. It's not. It's certainly not going to be a one-off. It's about $200 million purchase price, I think, something in that ballpark. So certainly, this is the start of something. It's not. It's not the one and all of their investments into the hard asset space. I wouldn't. I wouldn't say just royalty. I think this is a direct transition or expansion from US dollar treasuries to hard assets. And that's super exciting in
Yeah,
and of itself.
yeah. If you read Tether's disclosure and what they've put out there, they actually have they have the USDT, which is the US dollar stablecoin. They also have a stablecoin that they produce that's linked to gold. I think it's XAUT. I think they have 7 tons of gold associated with that, so not an insignificant amount. And if you read their disclosure, they're hard asset guys. They believe in their I guess so hard asset in the definition of they don't believe in fiat currencies. And so they're looking to get more exposure. So for a company that has generates $4 to $5 billion a year in cash flow, they've got their idea that they can writing a check for $200 million to take a chunk of Elemental seems it's a drop in the pool, but it's a stepping stone into the industry.
So yeah, so anyway, that's what we knew up until that point. We did something that we traditionally don't do, which is buy on the market before we had the opportunity to chat with management and learn more about what's going on. We did find comfort in the fact that we knew the company from before and the affiliation with the Discovery Group. So we made an initial purchase that same day, and I think I guess before we move on to your conversation with Frederick, I do want to say after that the next thing that happened is the Australian guys that have this podcast called Money of Mine produced this incredible 15-minute portion of a podcast describing in detail how Tether works and how much money they have access to. And that was also, we knew Tether was big, but not to that scale. So I think kudos to them for doing the legwork and, bringing this up to surface and light how big the scale of this opportunity can be.
But that also highlights how this was kind of missed, right? Like you have a couple of Aussie guys, and they put on a good podcast. You have a couple of Aussie guys are the only guys that really flagged this. This is a Canadian company that's head office in London, and a couple of Aussie guys, flagged it as being very interesting. And so, I think the Western mining media, I think, missed it for that in reality. The other thing that was interesting and subsequent to us taking a position is they swapped over the board very quickly. And Tether, I think what gave us comfort is that, while Tether changed the board and put in some of their own people in place, they kept Fred Bell and David Baker, the current CEO and the current CFO, the guys who sort of built the company to here. And I think that was something that also gave us comfort. It kind of showed us that this wasn't a smash and grab. These were guys that, you keep the guys who built the company when you're looking for something, when trying to build something, right?
Well, and our view is potentially they're going to put the money behind these guys who know the space very well and can identify new opportunities. But that was speculation up until the point where you had a meeting with Fred.
Yeah,
and maybe walk us through what he shared with you about the vision and what's happening next with the company.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? So we had a conversation. I had a conversation with Fred. Again, a management team that's super responsive. I think, kind of as an aside, if you're an investor in this space and you want to know what's going on with a company, reach out. If the company doesn't want to talk to you, don't bother, unless they give you a credible reason why they can't chat. And so Fred was very responsive, and I know that they were very busy. And so we were able to have a chat with him. And I think there was sort of 3 key takeaways. So when they had their first meeting with Tether, the conversation starts with, assume that I have read all of your public disclosure. this is from the Tether side. Assume that I've read all your public disclosure and I know everything that's there. Tell me what I need to know about the company. And that the first conversation happens in May. So from May till middle of June, Tether was able to move very quickly and execute on moving two very very large blocks of stock. Not something that happens overnight. So it struck me as very serious. This isn't a smash and grab. The other thing that struck me is I said, what I kind of said to Fred is like, you have a lot of money now. You have this big financial backer. What are you going to do with that? How does that work? And he's like, are you just going to go in? And he's like, listen, I asked him, do you want, like, we can build this company really fast if we pay 10% more than everybody else for everything. And it kind of got the no, that's not what's going to happen here. We're going to, they still want us to build the company properly. And I think that gave us comfort. But you have a company that you have an investor now that's focused on fundamentals and has a balance sheet that they want to deploy into hard assets. And so now all of a sudden you have I think that's something that makes a lot of sense. And then the other question I asked him, and I think this is an important part of our investment thesis, why we're in Elemental, was, are you getting different calls, right? Are there different people out there looking at your stock? And he said, yeah. He said that was the interesting part, is that they had some different hedge funds, some different investors that were reaching out. And I think that this is, I guess there's, part of our thesis on this is that, for lack of a better term, if the crypto bros show up and decide to buy the stock, and it could become like a meme coin from a valuation perspective. It could really move in a hurry. And I think that that's something that makes it very interesting. And so those are kind of the three key salient points that, from my conversation with Fred.
I think that it's exciting from the perspective of being involved with Elemental as a shareholder. But for me, I think the most important is we constantly, frequently complain about the lack of new liquidity and capital moving into the space. And overnight, out of nowhere, you have this group that has immense liquidity. I don't think there's many businesses out there that generate $5 million in profit. And from what I can tell, they're looking to deploy all or most of that into our space. That is an incredible amount of liquidity. And, my speculation, and I don't know this for a fact, obviously, is that Elemental is just going to be one of the vehicles that they're going to look to use to get more involved in the space. And it's a little bit like, think about what happened with La Mancha, which coincidentally is actually one of the sellers at this point of this block. But it was a similar story when La Mancha got involved with Endeavor, and gradually they've been involved with other, they put more money to work in the space by getting involved with different business groups. I can see that happening, but in this case to a much larger scale. And frankly, that's fantastic news for our space. And we sat down last week to think, where else can this money go? Other than the obvious element, backing Elemental to do deals, presumably in the royalty space, but where else could they go? And the opportunities are endless, frankly. We named a bunch of royalty companies they could target in a similar way, but they could also get involved in some sort of private equity. They could get involved in controlling positions in miners, like La Mancha has done in the past. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, if you look at their business, it's very much like a royalty company. The revenue per employee would be very similar to a Franco Nevada or a Wheaton Precious Metals. And so I think that's, I think they get the business model on the royalty side. I think that's why they were so attracted to Elemental. And Elemental was a place where they could get a stake very quickly. I think that's the other thing that's kind of important. They got in control. And so I think that, this is their first foray. We'll see what happens here. I think if the stock continues to move, if the valuation continues to look good, I think Elemental will be aggressive. I think they'll be aggressive with their paper on buying other royalty companies, and I think they're going to be aggressive on new royalty deals. And and I think that that's good for the space. I think having capital there. I don't know if they're gonna, I mean, I think it'd be pure speculation to say, oh, they're gonna go into miners or they're gonna go into other things. But I could see this a situation where Elemental starts looking at, Elemental's new royalties are ones where they try and, receive physical. One of the things on Tether's balance sheet is physical gold. They are hard asset guys, and so you might see a slight change there. But I think that's it's about the I think it's about the gold link cash flow that they're after, and so I'm really curious to see. I guess we've got probably from an olive perspective, we've got what, half a position in Elemental at this point, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
And so, that, and it's moving in the right direction. And so let's, we are a wait and see, but I think this is very, very interesting for the space. And I think it's something that could be potentially game changing. And where I think it's game changing and where I think it's different is not that, Tether's capital is going to get washed around in the space slowly, but it's, you have a group of investors that are, the hardcore Bitcoin guys. There's a lot of crossover between the gold bugs and the Bitcoin bugs, right? They're both sort of anti-fiat, fiat currency groups. So if you get a crossover where the crypto folks say, oh, I can get that same anti-fiat exposure with royalty companies and miners, then and gold miners, then all of a sudden that has the potential to move over. And remember that you've got a very constructive gold tape as well. Gold has definitely outperformed Bitcoin over the last over this year, and it's entirely driven by central bank buying, who can't buy Bitcoin. So it's a very interesting situation.
Yeah, and the other thing that could happen here, which is the most logical from a crypto angle, is that the success that the Tether has had with the USDT, which is the crypto linked to the US dollar, the stablecoin that they call. They have this, as you mentioned earlier, the gold link, the gold linked one, and think about it like a trust. As people buy more and more of this coin and they issue more and more of this coin, they have to turn around and back it with gold. And our view is that they sense that happening and they're trying to front run it by acquiring this, call it, streams of gold. There's royalties and there's differences, but what I mean is like access to future gold contractually through Elemental. And if there is a flood into this stablecoin, to this gold coin, they will have to be very aggressive buying, whether it's physical, whether it's Paulson, the way Paulson thinks about it, which is buying gold in the ground with the massive deposits in BC and Alaska. They'll have to get very aggressive because obviously that's the mandate behind that coin. So when you say the crypto bros may just come in a wave to bid for Elemental, then we also come and just bid this gold coin, and it could transform the way our industry works. And we'll receive them with open arms. They're more than welcome to come.
The joke I had with one of the principals of the Discovery Group is that we know how to, we could lose the money just as well with exploration companies as they can and make meme coins. So it's kind of the same game to some extent. I think that's an interesting point. So I guess the thesis is where we win. You have a group with we win slowly. You have a group with you have a smart group of guys who now have a balance sheet to go deploy capital in a strong manner. So we win, right? That business gets more valuable as they execute. The other way we win is the crypto, the crypto investors, they cross over and go, oh, this gold thing, it's exciting. First place they go is, oh, Tether owns a bunch of Elemental, we should own a bunch of Elemental, and you get maybe an AMC type moment, for lack of a better description. So those are two ways we win. The thing that we always look at, and I think that this is something, when you talk about philosophically as an investor, is how do you lose on this trade? And I think that's always something that's really important for us, is that, what's our downside? What goes wrong here that we would be worried about? Obviously, we've got the gold tape at our back, and so it's easy. It's a little bit easier. It mitigates a lot of risks. But I think the places where we lose is that all of a sudden, because they're awash with capital, we get an undisciplined approach to new acquisitions, right? They overpay, they get out of it. Similarly, they get this. Similarly, they overpay on M&A, right? And they do damage to the company that way. And I think those are the two things that are the downside. Obviously, we know the management team, we're comfortable with that, so we're and our conversation with them based on their what they've been told from their new largest shareholder is that's not going to be the case, but we gotta wait. We gotta wait and see there.
Yeah, and I guess just to wrap it up, I think part of the reason we're doing this episode is because of the lack of coverage we've seen to this news event, which frankly I think could be transformational. And maybe we're too bogged down looking at single company press releases about drill holes, etc., which are all exciting. But I think this is more encompassing, and it doesn't only pertain to Elemental. Could have consequences for the entire industry. So I think it's important that we discuss this news and that it gets adequate coverage. We're doing our little part here with the distribution that we get here from the Crux, and yeah, so we'll be watching this one very closely and the rippling effects that it may have.
I mean, and I'll be honest, we'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. On Elemental and what's happened here. I think it's I agree. I think it's undercovered. I think people don't quite realize what it could mean. And I think that's something that's part of the reason we kind of shot, we go back to that thesis, right? We shot first and then we kind of figured out the rest and solidified our investment thesis after. I think I think as this starts to circulate, I think more people are going to be very, very curious as to what happens here and how this proceeds. So,
sorry, before you wrap up, I think just to plug in, obviously our investments, but this is this should help re-rate all of the mid-tier royalty companies, especially the ones that have strong shareholders. Plug for ourselves, we're shareholders of Sailfish. That's a company we like very much. It's re-rated really nicely over the last couple of months. We even got some inbounds thanks to this podcast from people very far away who had never heard about the opportunity, did some research, found it interesting, have invested. So it tells us that the distribution is working, but also that plugging in for our names may also help them and help us indirectly. So that's one that we think it's could be part of this move where there's a re-rating as part of this. It's a smaller company, but it's a similar company in the sense that it has strong shareholders and a strong management team.
There really are three. I mean, there are. When we figure there are three royalty companies that are a similar situation that Elemental was. There was Fish, which we own, Triple Flag, which is Elliott Asset Management's the major shareholder there. I think there's one more, and I can't remember it now off the top of my head, that has a major shareholder. And I think that those are ones that are easy for someone like if there is a move for consolidation. Those are ones where Tether could target. I don't think we own Sailfish because of that. We own Sailfish because we think that there's a fundamental re-rating that's going to occur with that royalty. I think market hasn't recognized that that's a tier 1 royalty. We own Elemental because, I mean, literally, and it sounds really, really simple. We own Elemental because Tether's there, and we're curious to see what their foray into the mining space, into the mining royalty space, looks like.
And because we like the management.
And we like management. Well, we don't. Our assumption is that the disciplined growth that they've seen, they're going to continue to do. They're just going to do it with a lot more firepower today. So, with that, thank you everybody for tuning in this week to the Compass on our chat about Elemental and Tether buying a stake. Curious to hear what other people think about this and what it could possibly mean for the space. Thank you.